Hello everybody and welcome to World of Warplanes. Now we're doing an overview of the Spitfire 1 today. This was the iconic World War II fighter that fought in the Battle of Britain, was often credited for winning the Battle of Britain, although to be honest I think that award should really go to the Hurricane, which did the bulk of the hard work. Although to be fair to the Spitfire's win to loss ratio was much better than the Hurricane. But you know, there were fewer of them, they achieved fewer things, and the Hurricanes did most of the shooting down on the bombers. But be that as it may, this fighter was genuinely amazing when it came out. It was easily the equal of the Messerschmitt, which was the German equivalent, and it was better than basically everything else. It was also one of the only fighters to serve through the whole of the war. The Spitfire 1 came into service just before the war started, and Spitfire Mark 20 something, 20 whatever, were in service long after the war. They started finally decommissioning them in the 50s, and there were plenty of international air forces that used them well into the 50s, and it was constantly being upgraded and improved and rearmed, new engines, new guns. They had a reconnaissance variant, they had a carrier-borne naval variant. It was just ridiculous the amount of use they got out of this basic design. But here we have the original, the Spitfire Mark 1. 3-bladed propeller, as you can see, 8 machine guns scattered along the wings. Slightly different to the Hurricane. The Hurricane had 4. Well, I say had 4. It had 4 machine guns in each wing as well, but they were much more closely grouped, which made the Hurricane a much more stable gun platform, which is why the Hurricane was often used for attacking bombers, because the Hurricane had thicker wings, so they could group the guns together better. So this is the Spitfire. It was originally designed, actually it started in 1931, with what was called the Supermarine Type 224, which, if I actually work out how to use this video editing software properly, you will see a picture coming up of it. And this was designed by R.J. Mitchell in response to an Air Ministry specification for a modern fighter. They wanted a new, up-to-date fighter aircraft, because up till this point, most fighters were basically the same as the ones that were used in the First World War. They had bigger engines, but that was about it really. They were slightly faster, but fundamentally they were the same design. You know, a Fairey Firefly from 1920 whatever was fundamentally not really all that different to a Sopwith Camel. So they wanted something up to date, and it had to be able to go at least 250 miles an hour. You know, this gives you an idea of their ambitions at the time. So Supermarine submitted this Type 24 design. You should be able to see a picture of it coming up, and it was horrific. Had this massive fixed undercarriage, it had an open cockpit, enormous gull wings. It just was a bad plane. I think it was supposed to have 4 machine guns, but you know, it was just complete garbage really. And in fact it was rejected in favour of the Gloucester Gladiator. So this competition, this call, which was designed to get the Air Ministry a new modern fighter, ended up with them getting yet another biplane. And to be fair to the Gladiator, it was a very good biplane. It was one of the first ones to have internally sprung wheels, so you'll notice if you see the picture that the wheels did not have any kind of axle going across them, because the wheels had internally sprung suspension. It had 4 machine guns. It was a decent biplane. However, it was still a biplane, which meant that it was fundamentally out of date. Now, Mitchell did not give up. Him and his team carried on, and they started developing the Type 300, which was based on the S series of Schneider Trophy seaplanes. So these were racing seaplanes which had been entered in the race for the Schneider Trophy, and they won it so many times that they actually got to keep the Schneider Trophy. It was that good, and their new fighter was based on this design. So it was a very sleek, very speedy, thin-winged, powerful engine plane, a bit like the Spitfire in fact. Funny that. And this was submitted in 1934 in July, and this was also rejected. So what do you do now? Any normal person would probably have given up by this point, but Mitchell and his team carried on. They further refined it. They gave it an enclosed cockpit instead of the open one that it had previously. They gave it an oxygen system so the pilot could breathe pressurised oxygen at high altitude. And finally, they gave it a new engine, which was a new type of Rolls-Royce V12 inline water-cooled engine, which eventually, once it was finished and full production, became known as the Merlin. So it got the Merlin engine. This was resubmitted in November, so it took them about 4 months to do it. And this time, it was accepted, and that was what became the Spitfire. And in fact, I think the Air Ministry wrote a new specification around the plane once they'd seen how good it was. Now, it took a couple of years of more development after that, because at this point all they were doing was effectively submitting drawings and basic specifications. They hadn't actually built anything, and the first prototype flew about a year and a half later on the 5th of March 1936, and this was 4 months after the Hurricane. So the Hurricane was the Spitfire 1's counterpart during the Battle of Britain, and it was designed by Sidney Cam, who worked for the company Hawker. And the Hurricane was almost like although it had a very similar design, it had the low wing monoplane, 8 machine guns, Merlin engine type thing. The Hurricane was almost like the ultimate evolution of the biplane, because it was actually built using fairly similar technology. It had canvas fuselage to the back, and I can't show you one because there isn't one in the game. But the Hurricane, in some ways, although it was a modern fighter, it was actually out of date almost as soon as it was built, and the Hurricane did not stay in service for that long by comparison to the Spitfire. It went into ground attack roles eventually and then kind of faded away. It got used in the Far East for quite a long time because the Far East was kind of back of the queue for equipment. So the MSG had these two fighters. They had the Spitfire and they had the Hurricane, and they actually had more Hurricanes because the Spitfire had a rather lot of teething troubles when it came to manufacturing it, because so much of it was actually new. In many ways, I think it was the F-35 of the time. If anybody's been following the development of the Joint Strike Fighter for the Royal Navy, and the Americans as well, but obviously I'm British, I only care about the Royal Navy. It was that kind of thing. It was almost like it was so new that it took them a while to actually work out how to build it in any significant numbers, which they did eventually, but it took a little while, which means by the time we got to the Battle of Britain, about something like 2/3 of fighter command was actually Hurricanes. But no, so that was cool. They got it accepted, and the prototype flew. And then what happened? Well, it took another 2 years. 4th of August 1938 was when the first production Spitfire Mark 1s entered service. They entered service with number 19 Squadron at Duxford, and unfortunately Mitchell did not live to see it because he got pancreatic cancer and he died on the 11th of June in 1937. So although he designed the fighter, he never got to see the production version, and he died very young, which I think is actually quite sad. Because Mitchell is one of those guys. There's always you get some people without whom we probably would have lost the war, and I think Mitchell was one of them. He's just one man who led the team that built this, and without this is one of the war-winning weapons. It's like, in some ways, it's like the Russian T-34. Every nation has its iconic weapon. The Germans have the Tiger tank. The Russians have the T-34. The Japanese have the Zero. The Americans, I don't know what the Americans would have actually. They must have quite a few. But I think we have the Spitfire. I think the Spitfire is like the iconic, along with the Lancaster as well. I think the Spitfire is the iconic British weapon of World War II. It pretty much sums up everything. So yeah. It wasn't originally going to be called the Spitfire either. Mitchell did not like the term Spitfire. He wanted to call it the Supermarine Shrew, which just goes to show that however good he was as an aircraft designer, he really should have left the naming up to somebody else. However, fortunately for history, he was overruled, and we did not have an awesome fighter with an unbearably stupid name, which was just as well. So, right, let's move on to how this thing works in game. So, now we have the tech tree thing up on the left hand side. We can see how it goes. So your basic stock Spitfire has the Merlin 2 at 1030 horsepower. Have the Spitfire 1 chassis, which I can apply here, and it looks basically the same. Don't think there's actual kill markings. It'd be cool if they did that actually on these planes, if they added, like, every time you got kills in a plane it gave you more markings. I guess eventually you would run out, they'd have to change colour or something because you'd run out of space. Anyway, and then you've got 2 sets of 4 machine guns, so you've got 8 machine guns. Now this is a, if I put the Merlin 2 on as well, even though it's got 2 blades for some reason, it should have 3, but never mind. I think it should have 3 anyway. Either way, so that's your basic stock Spitfire. Spitfire 1, and then you go to the upgraded engine. This gives you slightly more horsepower, so you've got 1050. Actually, I believe, I'm going off memory here, I believe the Merlin 3, I can't remember whether the Merlin 3 or the Merlin 2 was the Spitfire 1 engine from the Battle of Britain. Anyway, and then what happened was they did some upgrades, and you had the Spitfire 2. So the Spitfire 2 was this chassis, with some minor differences which you can't really see here. And the Spitfire 2 was given the Merlin 12. So if you use this setup here with the Merlin 12, what you've got now, historically speaking, is a Spitfire 2A. I'm just going to turn the sound down actually, because there's too much background noise. Okay, good. Right, maybe you can hear me better. And this was the Spitfire 2. So this is Spitfire 2. Now the cannons come in because 8 rifle caliber machine guns. So it was actually a pretty crappy armament, even with 8 of them. They just weren't very powerful. The Americans did better because the Americans used heavy machine guns, which were 12.5mm, whereas these were 7.7, and the bullets were just too small. And you know, they could shoot down bombers, but it took a lot of bullet hits. You know, you'd have stories of Heinkels coming home from bombing raids, and they're full of holes, but they've not been shot down because all the 7.7mm bullet does, it just pokes little holes. And everybody more or less was moving to cannons. The Messerschmitt 109E, which was what the Spitfire's main opponent in the Battle of Britain was, had cannons, and they usually had 20mm cannons. Now the British at the time, at the Battle of Britain, I think they were just getting a cannon into service, so they knew about it and they were working on it, but the difficulty was actually getting a decent cannon. And they did that with the Spitfire 2. So the Spitfire 2A is what I've got here with 8 machine guns. The Spitfire 2B, they added cannon, and they replaced the 2 inboard machine guns in each wing with a 20mm cannon, and it looked like this. And then a few Spitfire 2s later on, they added the Merlin 20, and the Merlin 20 was much more powerful. So now we've got 1,400 and something horsepower. Merlin 20 for a while was earmarked for the Hurricane, so Spitfire didn't get it for a while. And then historically, again, the Merlin 20 Spitfire really was the Spitfire 5. That was the stopgap solution that ended up being one of the most produced Spitfire marks ever made, and took over later on. So that was that. Now, in game, you want the Spitfire 2 chassis, because you go from where are we? Let's just hover over it. You go from 180 hit points to 200, so you get an extra over 10% hit points, which is useful. That's a helpful thing. And then you want to go up the engines, because it's a bit underpowered here, so you want to go up the engines as quickly as possible. If you get to the Merlin 20, that's helpful, because when you get to the Spitfire 5, it means you don't have to start off with the stock engine, you get the more powerful engine straight away, which is useful there. And then you want to upgrade the armament. Now, there's some debate in here as to which armament is better. This is a no-brainer, you want the most powerful engine, obviously. This is a no-brainer. With here, there's a bit more debate. So, the general consensus that I found online, given that I don't play this game a huge amount and I'm hardly an expert in it, is that you want to use 8 machine guns. So you want to have this set up here. The reason is because although your firepower is less, the firepower is just over 100 here. Whereas if you put the cannons on, it goes up to 190, almost 200, 190. The cannons negatively affect your flight characteristics. So if you notice when I hover over the cannons on the right hand side, you see airspeed has gone down by 11 and manoeuvrability has gone down by 7. So if you take the cannons, you are effectively sacrificing speed and manoeuvrability in return for firepower. Now the problem with this is that the cannons aren't that amazing as cannons go. So they do give you extra firepower, but there are better cannons around. They overheat quite quickly, and your range still isn't amazing. So in some ways you're better using the 8 machine guns, just getting in close, and then using the machine guns. Because the Spitfire primarily, the Spitfire is a dogfighter. It's designed for manoeuvring, but it's something of a jack of all trades. So you can usually outmaneuver some opponents, and the opponents that are good enough to outmaneuver you, like say a Zero or I think maybe a Yak 7, for example, you can outdive them, outrun them, you know, do a boom and zoom type thing. Now, the other side of the coin is that with cannons you do get more firepower. So if you're going against like an IL-2 or some heavy fighter or something like that, a cannon allows you to do more damage and shoot them down more quickly. Whether that's worth it is largely up to you, and also if you want to do some ground attack, then the cannon is almost a requirement. So it's up to the individual user, depending on how you see your mission, I guess, in the game going. if you're going to do lots of dogfighting, if you think you're going to do lots of dogfighting, then take the machine guns, because the cannons could make the difference between being able to outmaneuver somebody and being outmaneuvered. But if you're going to do lots of taking on heavy fighters, taking on ground attack, not doing much in the way of dogfighting, then take the cannons. So on balance, it's probably better off with the machine guns, but there are advantages to having the cannons. Those advantages do exist, so I would recommend that you just bear those in mind. Now for equipment, what I took on this was, because when I originally did this I was doing it for a cannon build, and I knew the cannons negatively impacted these numbers here, so what I did was I took things to boost those. So the lightweight airframe gives you plus 3% to manoeuvrability. The engine tuning, what does that do? That gives something to do with speed, I think. Plus 5 to engine power. Fractal sight just makes you more accurate. So the idea was to compensate for the loss in airspeed and manoeuvrability caused by the cannons in order to make the cannons more viable. I'm not entirely sure that was a good idea, because these don't seem to be able to manoeuvre that well anyway. But you know, again, it's just one of those things. So that's my opinion of the Spitfire. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show a few clips of a few different battle situations, so you can see the way I deal with things. And as I say, I'm not an expert. There's probably better people you can see. But anyway, so I'll go on to that, and I hope you're enjoying the video so far. Okay, now in our first battle, we are going to talk about going head to head. Now, in the Spitfire, I would not recommend going head to head against anybody, and we'll soon find out why. Now, this is the first thing I do in any given battle, is try to go for height. So I use my boost. In this case, I actually used almost all of it, but usually the Spitfire gets a 15-second boost, and I use about 10 seconds of it at the start to gain height, and then I let it charge back up while we fly towards the enemy team, wherever they are. And there's quite a lot of bots here, and you can tell who the bots are because they all have these names. Any name that looks vaguely sensible is probably a computer player. So contacts are over there, so now we're heading this way. Still trying to maintain height. Now in real life you wouldn't usually fly in a straight line, but because I have a radar in this game apparently, that's okay. Now there's, who are we looking at? I think I've picked, who have I picked? Him. Now I think that is a Blenheim. I vaguely remember that being a Blenheim. There we go. There we go, Blenheim F. Now I'm going head to head. Right, now I'm actually not going head to head here. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get out of going head to head, because this guy, I think this guy's got the cannons. So if you look at the bottom left, you can see 2 cannons, 1 machine gun. Now he's got 2 cannons in the nose, which means that those things are powerful. The other difference, which you've got to remember when you look at the armaments, is where the guns are placed. Blenheims, heavy fighters and Blenheims and these kind of planes, if their guns are in the nose, that gives them a very narrow, very focused cone of fire, which means they do a lot of damage very quickly. The Spitfire, when it has cannons, are in the wings, which makes them less accurate, and a wider cone of fire, so you don't hit as often and do less damage. Now, watch this. I'm slowing it down. I'm trying to get out of the way. He's cannoning me. Watch my hit points going down. I'm on fire. Down to 88, 75, 63, 55, and we're past. I'm on fire, and somebody else is hammering me, and I'm out. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's not actually portable. That's quite cool. Look at that. This is what happens when you go head to head with an enemy plane, especially when he's got backup. Because there's the Blenheim, and there's the other guy. I think that's might be the other guy who took me out. So never go head to head in the Spitfire. You don't have the hit points for it, and you will get hammered, especially against a heavy fighter. Heavy fighters are designed to go head to head. So don't. Try and stay out, and then try and outmaneuver them, get behind them. You'll notice I've got the cannons on here. Try and get behind them and try and outmaneuver them. That's the only way you're going to manage that. So that is the first lesson. So here we are in another game. Here we're all tier 5s, so this is actually a slightly less friendly game mode than it was last time. The problem with last time was that I was top tier and I got a bit complacent, and then I died almost immediately and let my team down rather heavily. Though I feel with this game sometimes it comes down to who's got the least amount of bots on any given team, because here you've got 1, 2, 3, there's just not that many real players on Modern Warplanes. But these are all tier 5s, so that's fine. So let's see how this goes. So we do the usual boost. Do a quick victory roll because I have no hubris at all. Still trying to gain height. Speed is running down, so we're going to have to level out in a minute. Just rolling, moving around, mucking around. There we go, we're getting quite high. Surrounded by cloud. I'm not sure how cloud cover works in this game. Here we go, head to head with somebody who's trying to go head to head with me. Or he was. There we go, Focke-Wulf 190. I think, yeah, there we go. I think, yeah, I'm using machine guns in this one. Kill number 1. XF44, XP40, I don't know, I can't even remember. Who are we heading for? I was trying to find him. I was like, where is he? Where is he? There he is. Wait, no, he isn't. Lost him. There he is. No, I haven't. Oh, there he is. I was just trying to find targets. I don't even know what I was doing at the moment. So here we go. This is a heavy fighter again. Trying to catch up with him. I'm using my boost to try and stop him from... I don't know whether he knows I'm there, but now he's turning, so he's trying to get on me. But I'm too close, so I can turn inside him. Get some shots out. That's the other advantage of machine guns. These machine guns take ages to overheat, which means you can get some... now he's out of range. And my engine overheated, so I can't really get him anymore. So he's going to turn around and try and nail me back. So now I need to dive. He's actually going for somebody else anyway, so that's fine. So now we dive down. There's a yak. Try and take the yak out. Trying to help my teammate. My teammate is out. The yak has a really nasty 37mm cannon, which I discovered. I think it's this one, which I discovered after the fact. I'm going way too quickly here. I've got some hits on him anyway. And then we turn around to outmaneuver him. I've got the machine guns. The machine guns, as I say, make me more manoeuvrable. I got an assist on the 110. Come on, 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 come on. Oh, crap. I think I collided with him then. That was, I don't know how I survived that. Ramming attacks, I know they nerfed them because people were tending to rely on them more than actually shooting people down. So that's 2 kills so far. Now we need to gain more height because we're quite low. And our team is actually winning at the moment. We're doing well. So now I'm heading over here because you see these... where are we? There's the mouse. Over here. It shows there's some ground attack aircraft over there. Which, if we look at the team listing, there is 1 IL-2 and 1 Beaufighter still not accounted for, which are both heavy fighters / ground attack aircraft. The Beaufighter is nasty. So we're trying to gain height at the same time. Everybody else is following us now. I'm trying to let my boost cool down as well. So I'm basically just preparing for the next fight now. So you can see machine guns are effective as well, but you just need to get closer. And the other thing that you need to do, which I didn't really do here, is better. I need to have better throttle control. So like that yak, I overshot him. When what I should have done is slowed down a bit, put the flaps down, reduced the throttle, whatever, and then just sat on his tail and just filled him full of lead. So right, somebody is around here somewhere. He should be visible. I'm confused as to why he's not visible. Although maybe it's just because I'm not within. I don't know how the visual range works in this game. I may not be close enough. Oh, somebody's shown up. There he is. Oh, so the HS is a heavy fighter as well. I did not know that. And that time I had to overshoot because he turned into me. So try and swing round again. He's not actually trying to dogfight me. Well, he's just flying in a straight line. I'm not sure where he's... Oh, I was just asking to get shot then. He didn't shoot. Oh, the IL-2's going for me, maybe. I don't know, I'm confused now. There's the Beaufighter. Beaufighter's got dog-piled by everybody. He's out. IL-2, these things are tough. This is where cannons are useful. Look how long his health bar is taking to go down. I hit him several hundred times. And this is what I mean, I'm trying to slow down here, to just sit on his tail and just pump lead into him. And I figure he's already going down, and I've already done it to him, so I'm just going to leave him out. And then he actually shoots somebody down, so now I'm coming back around. He's saying it was pure luck. But he's down, so I wasn't going to do anything now. And now we just have the bowfighter. Not the bowfighter, the other one. I got 2 more assists there as well. So that was the dogfighting. Now that wasn't actually a great dogfight because I was trying to shot the guy down, but that's the advantage of the machine guns, is they give you that maneuverability. So that's all of the replays I've got time for, I think, for this video, because it's already got quite long. I hope you enjoyed this mini documentary and things. This represents a departure from the type of things I normally do, so please let me know if you enjoyed it, because if you did, I will quite happily make more of these kinds of miniature documentary type vehicle overviews, World of Warships, World of Tanks and things as well. It's not just going to be limited to Warplanes. But I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.